Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of GSMA Intelligence's DataPoint. My name is Peter Jarich. I am the head of GSMA Intelligence, and today we're here to talk about Huawei's Mobile Broadband Forum. It's an event that recently wrapped up in Dubai. It's an event that a lot of folks in the analyst world have been to many times, all of us here at GSMA Intelligence included. And as one of the drivers of network infrastructure innovation, and a lot of what goes on in mobile, it's always an important event just to get an idea of what's going on in the industry and connect with a particularly important network infrastructure and innovation supplier. So glad to be here with Emanuel Kolta, who was with me in Dubai for the event, and Tim Hatt, who wasn't, but has some things to weigh in on, particularly as on the topic of sustainability, which was a huge topic this year. So, hey, guys.
How you doing, Peter?
Hi.
Great. So I'm just going to dig right into it. As you all know, we kick off all these data points with a number. For anyone who even followed the Huawei Mobile Broadband Forum from far, you probably know what the number is: 5.5. 5.5G was the overriding theme at this year's event. The idea was really that we're going to need this, whatever it is, and we'll probably define it in just a little bit, whatever this 5.5G thing is, to keep up with new services, new demands. And I'm going to turn this over to you, Emanuel, but before I do, I'm just going to make a bit of an admission here. Going into this, I have to say, I've not been a fan of the term 5.5G, right? For a few reasons. One, I get all the G's are a marketing term, right? No one defines what 5G is. The ITU sets out standards, which 5G is sort of a marketing term. We know there are these middle G's, but 5.5G has always seemed like a term that Huawei has used. And so it's felt like a bit of a Huawei branding term. So it kind of made sense for them to use it. But when you'd see operators get up and talk about 5.5G, and they would use these charts, they would use the same chart, or you would see other analysts use the term, it felt like it was less than objective, right? Sort of using a Huawei marketing term to make a point, and kind of also got a little bit confused with 5G Advanced, right? Where people are sort of talking about, well, 5G Advanced and 5.5G, and I'll admit later on, after we hear from you, Emanuel, that maybe my thoughts changed a little bit afterwards. But how do you see this, Emanuel? And what does 5.5G mean to you? And how should we think about it?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, we always have these kind of half Gs, or even we had 4.9G a few years ago as well. So it shouldn't be a surprise. In general, it's very hard to define these new Gs, and from a vendor perspective, you obviously want to give something new, want to package your newer solutions as well under a different umbrella term. So I think I'm definitely sure we're going to have 6.5G at some point in our life, but for now, 5.5G, I think it's an umbrella term where we pack everything into each other, and I think I haven't really heard as well this kind of expression from other major vendors either. So I think I agree on that point. Why 5G Advanced is like a well accepted global standard, which is often used by other vendors as well. The focus of this 5.5G is a different question. I'm curious, Peter, what have changed in your mind in Dubai about 5.5G?
So yeah, and it kind of goes to my next question, sort of about network innovation and what all gets included in it, because you brought up 5G Advanced, and I'll say I think I've seen a lot of conflation of the two, right? 5.5G and 5G Advanced, and that's kind of where, to me, I think things go wrong of why not use the term 5G Advanced? I mean, if we know 5G Advanced is coming and that's going to be an important part of what we want operators to do, why come up with this other term? And I think a bit of what I saw, because if we looked at the technologies that Huawei called out as part of 5.5G, 5G Advanced was one of them, right? They talked about RedCap, about passive IoT, talked about some other things, obviously integrated, comms and sensing, and a lot of stuff that we're going to look look at going forward. But they also talked about things that are here today, right? Millimeter wave. Like let's use more millimeter wave. Let's use their ELAA, right? The extra large antenna array. So high order, antenna innovation. So it was a bit of a stuff that's coming in the standards, the stuff that's available today. And for me, then it kind of, and I don't think they iterated this message very well, right? But when I looked at all the pieces, the message I got is 5.5G is really just what's next, right? How do we evolve what we've done? And if we've started with millimeter wave and we got some millimeter wave, what's coming next in 5G advanced? If we haven't done millimeter wave, what can we do? But sort of a recognition that we've gotten over this first wave, this first hump of 5G, and we're going to need to do something different wherever you're starting to address new traffic demands, new business models, and what could those things be? And so I think it was more of a sort of network vision versus technology vision versus a standards discussion. And that's where I think it kind of makes sense, right? Because it's sort of let's think about what's next, however we want to define it. So with that, I mean, there's a lot of demos there. Emanuel, what was of the demos you saw, and maybe this leads into some of the sustainability conversation, like what resonated for you in terms of on the demo floor?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Peter. I think I could see two outstanding things in this MBBF, and one of them is what we could start to see in Barcelona as well, that this is the second phase of 5G where we focus more on network efficiencies. So it's more like use every kilowatt hours and every spectrum what's possible. So it's still a bit familiar trend, but with a stronger push. And secondly, I think it was very uplink heavy for me. So while we could see that 4G was like, from a consumer perspective, you want to download data on a higher speed, you want to have access for more data with obviously the higher speed. 5G by the nature, obviously very enterprise focused, and enterprise want to like push uplink data traffic. So I think there was a lot of example how you can balance this out and how you can actually push data from IoT devices, from drones to the network. So I think there was this very heavy focus on how to gather this data and uplink it to the network. And I think I find it very interesting. I was personally fascinated to see new solutions around, not going to be surprised, but network efficiencies and especially energy efficiency. So this is not a new thing, but right now I think we reached the level when both from a software side, I think one of the key message what they wanted to push is 0 bits, 0 watts, and also despite last few years we shifted into the software side and software is in the focus, I believe, but I think there are very significant and very exciting innovations around the hardware, about used materials, about the antenna design, which not just about operational efficiencies and energy, but also how to save wind load, how to save rental cost, in this kind of whole way of whole concept of simplicity in the network, decreasing the number of equipments in the side, and I think it was very insightful to see these kind of new solutions on this side. So efficiency, uplink, and also this message that 5G is not competing with 4G from an enterprise perspective here. It's competing with Wi-Fi. So I think the whole concept of pushing down the price, being 5G more appealing for enterprises, because they're gonna compare it with Wi-Fi. So this is why RedCap, passive IoT, and all these innovations around affordability was I think in a key focus of the whole event.
Yeah, Tim, you weren't able to make it join us in Dubai, but obviously from a sustainability perspective, I mean, you've seen and you've driven a lot of our work there. You're doing somewhere. And some of what it's interesting. Some of what Emanuel reminds me of something that you wrote in a recent piece that we did around Edge, in terms of this idea that some of these numbers may look small as a share of overall energy consumption, but they're big numbers when you look at the amount of energy, right? So, I would say some of the interesting demos I've seen, right, is you see some of that, to the point that Emanuel brings up, some of the antenna designs where we can remove cables, so we remove cable loss, right? Yeah, that's a really minor like the savings there are obviously, we're not talking about, taking billions of cars off the road in terms of equivalence, but it's a small number that adds up when you add it to a bunch of other small things. I mean, how are you seeing the sustainability conversation, and maybe a bit of how you've seen Huawei play in there?
Yeah, I mean, we look at this, as you say, from a lot of different angles, and maybe kind of top down and then bottom up. I mean, when we look at the sustainability question, I mean, the telecom industry accounts for about 1% of global electricity usage, about the same as the hyperscalers do, which may sound like a small number, but that's equivalent to about 300 terawatt hours of energy a year. That's a big number. And of course, the industry is trying to transition to net zero over a long pathway, but it takes a lot of energy innovation to do that, which brings to the bottom up point of kind of little things or big things. So what we see in terms of a lot of the innovation, and some of which Emanuel was talking about around rectifiers, the use of AI, more efficient passive infrastructure, basically understanding how to set your network up to do more with less energy, is an absolutely fundamental part of how many operators are thinking about their long-term network strategy. And I think from a positive perspective, that's a really good recognition to have. We know about 80% of operators have an extreme or very high importance placed on energy efficiency and their network upgrades. From a sort of glass half empty perspective, the distribution of that take up across the industry is uneven, geographically and depending on operator size. So we need to see more action. I mean, I think to Huawei's credit, they're absolutely at the forefront of vendors pushing more energy efficient equipment, as are other groups. And we've been trying to, work to help, elucidate some of that in more detail. And I think actually we've recently published 2 reports as part of a report series with Huawei, and this called Green is Good for Business. And we'll be releasing the final one later this month ahead of the global COP event in Dubai. So there's a lot of things coming out of that. I think the last thing I would say, just from a business perspective, is that going green isn't just about the environmental imperative, fundamental though that is. If you look at the cost, because energy still eats up around 30% of telco OpEx, taking even 20% of your power costs down can flow through to your EBITDA of like 2 to 3 percentage points. So this is significant cash flow impacts, and we really want to convey that.
Yeah, I think it's we definitely saw that a lot from Huawei, and to Emanuel's point, the 0-bit 0-watt message was loud and clear. I think we heard it a lot. Big focus, and I think even I have to say probably one of the more compelling demos was even getting to the nitty gritty of how do you shut down equipment sort of on a moment's notice, and still sort out some of the condensation issues that may take place when you go from a super hot to a super cool environment. In short, I mean, I like that because I told Emanuel before we saw it how they did it. I figured it out. I knew my engineer, that they put those silicone packets, like you put in a box of shoes. But no, I mean, it was the fact that they were there and they actually brought that to show off, like really shows that there's a bit of a, we're serious about this. We're going to show you how it works. I will say, I think we heard from operators that it was important. So that was critical. This is the first of a 2-part series of these. We will be coming back next week to talk about some of what we heard on the service innovation front, obviously, and even a little bit more network innovation, maybe where they cross over, particularly where some of us were a bit surprised on the focus on in-building. But, beyond the service side of things, we heard from operators. We all heard the energy focus as well, because obviously this is really critical for them. Any last thoughts, Tim? Any last thoughts, Emanuel?
I mean, I guess what I would say, having been to Huawei's analyst conference in China earlier this year, I'd echo a lot of what you guys were saying about, 5.5G, and maybe just to round that out and link it to the sustainability point. I think really what's missing from the dialogue right now is how to translate product level upgrades into a long-term and financially viable investment strategy. I think we still want to see more connection from the vendors, linking that to what operators can realistically afford to invest in, given the economic climate, and really talking about how that drives kind of value uplift with the use cases not possible from 5G networks already in the ground. So lots of great stuff going on, but I'm going to look out for some of that detail, looking ahead.
Emanuel, last word to you.
From my side, we could definitely see that 5G is almost 5 years old now. So 2018 December, the first standard network, and you could see that this is definitely a different times, different level of 5G, and it's great to see the innovation. And I think it's a pretty cool few years are coming up with full of new solutions, both efficiency and both 5G capabilities. So yeah, it was good to see that there is proper innovation there. So
great. Well, thank you both for joining me, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, look for the second part coming up next week. I promise you the DataPoint won't be 5.5 again. We'll come up with something new. As always, if there are any questions you have, please reach out. We're happy to talk about this. I think we saw and heard some great things. We're seeing and hearing great things from the operators who are Huawei's customers as well as their competitors. So always happy to help put this all into context. Thank you once again, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everyone.